We are joined by the great Billy Lucci of TexAgs.com. And Billy, I wanted to talk to you because I feel like it has been very quiet in College Station. And I feel like recent off seasons have been more loud in College Station. So, like, what is it about Mike Elko's first off season that has caused, I don't know, a lack of drama versus what we saw under Jimbo Fisher the last few years?
Well, I think the stuff under Jimbo, I think, well, first of all, we had there was the whole Saban, Kiffin, Jimbo feud. So that was about the loudest of off season that you could have. Then there was, maybe it was last off season was a lot of portal stuff. This time around, I think that's going to happen to a pretty large degree when you have a head coaching, the end of a tenure, and it also happens to be the end of a tenure at an SEC school, right? Like, those become loud. There's a lot of drama in the offseason. There's a lot of, negativity swirling around a program as it starts to, as the tenure starts to swirl and spiral, right? So kind of expected, with the exception of the real theatrics a couple of years ago over NIL. As far as Elko, it kind of fits with how he does things, Andy. It kind of fits in that he's very much in control of every aspect of the program. And I mean that in a good way, not a I'm the only
one. A micromanager way.
Not in a micromanager, but more of a, hey, this is how it needs to be. And he's got people that he trusts that do it. It's just very, very organized, very in control, an entire staff on the same page. And it just, I think when you have that, and I think a noticeable level of discipline change, not just when you watch practices, but in the day-to-day operation of the program. And I think even within the staff, kind of, hey, Andy Staples, you got a job, do your job. And we don't function if you don't do your job. And Billy Lucci, same thing. And that's kind of how he runs it. And I think the players, from them coming in here and just me talking to them, and then, like you said, the lack of storylines in the offseason, it's actually a sign of a good thing. There's obviously a long way to go. He'll be the first one to tell you that. But it's certainly it's a good sign that things have been so quiet, particularly in the portal. This spring portal came and went. And, Andy, there was a massive culture change, a 180-degree difference in day-to-day expectation. And, you bring in a guy like Tommy Moffitt that doesn't go easy on them day-to-day in that weight room. And I think you lost like 3 guys that came in at the midterm, and just, quite frankly, the realization was they're not going to play. And, a veteran that hadn't got on the field yet in Bobby Taylor that's looking for a couple of guys like that. The only player you lost that was likely to, have a chance to play for you this year was Bryce Foster. And I think, if Bryce could be in maroon and white right now, he probably would. I just think he realized that it wasn't. I think both sides realized it wasn't a fit. It'd be best if it was going in a different direction. And I think,
Bryce is the center. Mark Naboo is the guy who would take over at that point.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting to me because we talk about this. This is what we heard about the tail end of the Jimbo Fisher administration. I realized, look, everybody comes out of the woodwork when a guy gets fired and says, well, this was happening. But it does seem like some of the issues that were plaguing Texas A&M over the last year or so were guys could do kind of what they wanted, and there weren't a lot of repercussions. And like you just mentioned with the employees, they're being told, hey, do your job. The players now getting told that too. How does that change things? How different does that make it within the locker room, within the off-season program even?
I just think when you see certain guys that that stayed on with a new head coach and a new scheme, and they had a real opportunity to just cut and run right when the season ended. They had a real opportunity to cut and run at the end of spring. Like guys that the starting caliber guys that were coming back, the big names, and believe me, there are still some big names and there's some NFL bound guys on this team. They were getting offered real money to go play elsewhere, particularly in this very league. And the fact that they didn't, and then on the second time around, now you're talking more about the guys that went through spring and realized, hey, I don't have a job locked down. I'm not guaranteed to start here. I need to compete. And they didn't leave either. That tells me they like the way they're being coached. They like where the culture's at, and they believe that they'll have, a fair shake to play if they do what the coach says. And they like kind of the feel and the vibe of the program, because otherwise you would have seen that exodus that people talk about.
When we had Mike Elko on the show, I was a little surprised. He was fairly critical of the talent level. And I know there's some things that he probably isn't going to say publicly, but when we spent so much time talking about that 2022 class and what they brought in, and I look at the projected depth chart for this season, and there's not a lot of that. In fact, the best player on the team might be a guy who should have been in that class, who's a hometown guy who went to Purdue.
Yeah, and he might be the best. And look, they've got an impact guy coming in, I think, on the O-line from Kansas. Purdue and Kansas are coming in, and they've been turning heads from day one. So, yeah, that 2022 class getting gutted took a lot of raw talent off the roster. There weren't a lot of guys that you're going to see starting at other places from that class. Several have already tried and failed. A couple of the biggest name guys at multiple schools already. But that was a lot of raw talent, or a lot of hoped for talent that was out the door. But there was also a lot of undeveloped talent still on the roster. And look, I'm not going to sit there and just, like you said, it's real easy to pick at the carcass of a coach that left. But one thing that's just a fair criticism and assessment is, when you look back, there's just been a lack of development. And these numbers are from 2020 to 2024, Andy. First round draft picks: Georgia 13, Bama 18, LSU 10. On and on. You include Texas and OU with 3 and 4. Texas A&M one first round pick in that 5-year stretch. And second round, Texas A&M 1. So 2 first or second rounders from 2020 to 2024. Bama 21. Georgia 21, Bama 28, LSU 16, Florida 10. Where do you want me to go? Auburn 5, A&M 2, South Carolina 4, A&M 2. So we've sat here, you and I, and I think fairly, this is fair. They recruited multiple top 6 classes, including, that one class, the highest rated class of all time. That wasn't me ranking the class. People that want to say, oh, look, he's at Tex Ag. So no, I didn't rank those classes. The national ranking systems, they were bringing in talent that everyone in college football, from Nick Saban to Kirby Smart to, Sark or Lincoln Riley, or who, Brian Kelly, everybody thought they're bringing in a lot of talent, because all those guys had offers to those places. The rankings, everybody that does them, whether it's at On3 or wherever, everybody thought that. They didn't develop. And so even just draft picks in general, 49, 46, that's at the top, right? And the teams that we were saying A&M was recruiting along with them. A&M's at 17. They're in that space.
Billy, this sounds very similar to another university in the state of Texas. This was Texas.
Man, I know where you're going.
3 years ago. It's true. This was Texas in the Charlie Strong and the Tom Herman eras. They would bring in highly rated talent. They were not putting out draft picks. Now you see what happens when those guys start developing, they make the college football playoff. They had 11 guys drafted this year. They had multiple first-round draft picks. Like that seems to be it's almost like what Steve Sarkisian has done is kind of Mike Elko's mandate there.
Yeah, it's kind of it's fascinating to say that, right? But there's a lot of truth to it. When you I haven't really studied every Texas draft pick like their fans think I do, but I give credit where it's due though. But Jonathan Brooks was committed to Herman. See, this is what the Texas fans won't do though. They won't let you like Kevin Sumlin claim Mike Evans and Johnny Manziel. Every snap they took was on him. That had to be Mike Sherman because Sherman was gone. But you can't do that with Herman and Sark. Sark has to get all the credit. But he really should in some of these guys. Like Jonathan Brooks was looking to flip to A&M and Jimbo. The Aggies were chasing 5-star in L.J. Johnson, who ended up going to SMU after a year. Jonathan Brooks was sitting there at Hallettsville, Texas, in the middle of a coaching change. There's a miss. The Aggies did look at Tavondre Sweat. They took his 5-star team, Byron Murphy's 5-star teammate from DeSoto, Shamar Turner, who, by the way, is having a great career at A&M, came back and is looking to follow suit as a high-round pick. That wasn't a mistake with Shamar by any stretch, but Byron Murphy, they didn't get involved in. So, but those are the guys that a lot of those guys, Sark and company, either inherited as recruits or they were on campus. So that's up to Elko, like you said, to kind of do the same thing here because
make them draft. Because I don't know that a lot of people would have looked at Tavondre Sweat when Sark came in and Bo Davis came in to be the position coach there and said that's a second-round NFL guy.
He's like
a 360-pound D tackle. Yeah. And then look what he turned into. And that's the thing with this group at A&M. There is talent on the roster.
For sure.
It's not like it's bare. It's just a matter of getting more out of it, it feels like.
Now, there's a lot of talent, too, that just transferred in. And so a lot of those guys are going to be they're going to play key roles if A&M's going to have a really successful this year and certainly moving forward. But, I mean, you look at some of the guys that they've brought in via the portal and Nick Scorton and Des Ricks, and from Bama they've brought in I mentioned Armaj Reed Adams from Kansas, who looks really good up front. Cyrus Allen, the receiver from Louisiana Tech, I think you'll see play a lot and if not start. And there's some others that I'm just right off the top of my head. But look, the issue is what he's walking into. If we're being real honest and say, and this can change during the season because there are options. Like I happen to think Shamar Stewart at the end of last year, by all accounts, was doing this. He comes in. He's a guy that everyone in the country tried to get to go in the portal. He stayed. He had a great spring getting after the quarterback. He looks like a first-round pick. He was playing like a guy bound for the NFL at the end of last year when there wasn't a lot to play for, it seemed like. So he's really encouraging. There's a lot of guys like that. But if you were to tell me today, who are the first or second round, who are going to be the first or second team all SEC picks to start the season? Whose names might we see on there? Realistically, it's Shamar Turner. It's Torian York, and it's probably Nick Scorton. Yeah. And I may be leaving somebody. That's probably it if we're saying first, second team preseason. I'm not saying no one can get there, but those are three. Two of them, one of them is a transfer. And then if you said, and I talk to these scouts all the time, who are the top 3-round picks this year? Not on campus, but like this year. You could probably say that with the potential, it's probably Turner, Stewart, who we talked about, and they would tell you maybe and Scorton. Again, one of the three wasn't even on campus. So they inherited plenty enough to compete very quickly, but this is not a roster loaded with NFL bound like talent in terms of the immediate future. highest end.
They're going to have to develop it if they're going to. Well, there is one guy who I think if he lives up to his potential has an NFL future, and that's Conner Weigman, the quarterback. And we haven't seen him since he got hurt last year. Obviously, he was there in the spring. He's still recovering. I heard Elko say the other day that he feels like he'll be fully ready for camp. But how different can this offense be with a healthy Conner Weigman?
/ solid offensive line play.
Right, that too.
Solid. I'm not saying great. With that combination, I think people have forgotten what Conner Weigman was putting on tape before he got hurt against Auburn last year. I think people forget that the SEC Nation came in that weekend, and if you'd have heard the things that group, which includes a couple of guys that really put a lot in the study in the quarterback position, what they thought of Weigman and his trajectory and his arc already, 4 games into that season, the way he ended his freshman year in that game against LSU, the way he played in his first career start that season, a year before against Ole Miss, and then to carry it through, even in that loss to Miami, people are looking at that tape that I respect, that have nothing to do with A&M going, go look at some of those throws and where he placed the ball and the pressure he was under and how many hits he took and the guts he had standing in there. So there's a ton to work with. The key is, he has to be healthy. I think what Mike Elko and Colin Klein did this spring was really significant in that Conner wasn't 100%. A lot of times in college football, you go not 100%, just sit him. We always think that, right? No reason to risk making it worse. Well, they determined that there wasn't the risk of making it worse. It just was he was not yet full speed. Those muscles around that injury, he had not been able to, fully strengthen them. And that's kind of, from talking to Conner, what happened while practicing. He wasn't going to get hit, but I watched him in the first spring practice and I watched him in the last, and it was night and day how far he came in terms of his agility, mobility. And he still, like, people that came to the spring game went, uh-oh. And I'm going, no. If you'd have seen him 15 practices ago, you'd have said, uh-oh. I thought that was really good. And more importantly, Andy, for the mental side, for Conner to practice with the ones, with this football team, with his teammates, and also to learn the offense while actually executing the offense and not watching from the sidelines. I thought that if he has that breakout season this year, and if that line can protect him where he can stay healthy and he has one of those breakout years, I think you can look back on that decision to kind of, force the issue and say, no, you need to practice. You can and you need to. And he was all about it. He was ready to get it back out there, but they also could have erred on the side of caution. And I'm looking at it right now going, I think it was pretty smart that they didn't.
Well, and the other thing is that they need to have him ready week 1. I mean, Notre Dame's coming in. That's going to be a huge game. Notre Dame is essentially making that game. It's not its season, but they feel like if they win that game, they're in a very good place because their schedule's not exceedingly hard this year. For A&M, it's Notre Dame. Then they're at Florida. They've got to jump in pretty quick.
It's an
opportunity.
A&M hasn't been hit with like and I say that, and they went 5-7 2 years ago, right? And 7-5, but they haven't. The SEC hasn't handed them any type of like brutal, unmanageable, you can't survive it schedule like the one Florida probably has this year.
Yeah,
I would say Texas got an absolute cake schedule. They do have to play Georgia. Michigan doesn't count. We're talking about conference here.
right.
They got handed a cake schedule by the SEC in year 1. And they do have Georgia, but they also get them at home. But outside of that, man, it was silver platter for year 1. But I say that as someone that's watched A&M in the last few years get handed some very manageable, and by SEC standards, they've had a couple cake schedules that they were not equipped to take advantage of.
Yeah,
and it's unfortunate because they should have been, and it looked like they were trending towards that. But This is not the toughest schedule ever. Look, you get Notre Dame, Missouri, LSU, and Texas at home. There's a world where those are your 4 toughest games. Now, Auburn might crack that party, and it's on the road. Florida, early in the year, who knows what you're going to get from either of these teams. Trips to South Carolina and Starkville, I get it. But no,
But yeah, at Florida, at Mississippi State, at South Carolina, if you had to say who do you want to play on the road,
right?
Vanderbilt's the only other person only other team you're adding to that list.
And there's no Ole Miss, no Tennessee, no Georgia, no Bama. I mean, it's not easy at all, but at least they didn't get handed like what Florida's looking at in year 1 under Elko. And again, like you said, if Conner can be the player that he's flashed and that he's shown in some SEC action, mind you, and where I think Elko's pretty excited, Andy, to be honest with you, is you can kind of tell he's not going to be the sunshine and roses guy at the pressers every week. He's going to keep it pretty honest. He's not going to throw guys under the bus or units, but you'll be able to tell. And you can already tell that coming out of spring versus entering spring, I think they're a lot more optimistic about what this defense can be. And they got the transfer linebacker from Pitt that, he should absolutely push to start there alongside York. And then they've got a few guys that didn't practice this spring coming back. I mentioned Shamar Turner. I mentioned Ricks. Trey Jones from Central Michigan, who was getting a lot of high-end SEC interest, and I think he's like a several-year starter there and was a team captain, safety. So they're having some guys come in that weren't even there in the spring. That'll be there in fall. So I think let's not forget 5-star Terry Bussey, who could compete to start at corner or wide receiver. So that defense could look even better once they start practicing in fall camp. But I think they came out of spring feeling pretty good about where it had a chance to be.
Well, and it does feel like they have the opportunity to kind of under-promise and over-deliver.
Yeah.
There's not the hype because of what you just said. And also, you talk about Elko. I think Elko's managed expectations fairly well by not allowing a lot of hype to creep in. Like when he comes on this show and says, that talent's not what you think it is. Like, that's him managing our expectations so that if they were to go 8-4, we're like, that's not bad for a first year. But I think they can be better than that if everything falls into place.
Yeah, I saw something the other day where they had their floor, their ceiling at 8 or 9-3, and their floor at 6-6. I don't really disagree with that when you say floor, but I do think this is a team that you could set that ceiling at a 10-2. I'm not expecting that, but you're talking about ceiling, right? We're not saying like what I think will happen. If you're talking ceiling, I do think maybe their ceiling might be a little bit higher if they're able to win close games. The position where I think you saw them go hard after Lambert Smith, who went to Auburn. There was a time where it looked like he was heading to A&M. Sam Brown from U of H ended up at Miami. It looked like he might be heading to A&M. Those were tough losses, and it tells you that they thought they need to continue to push the envelope at receiver and get better. And they lost Aniyah Smith, who was a really good SEC player for a long time, and they lost Evan Stewart, who was a very high potential guy. And I will not be surprised if he went and did some great things at Oregon.
Yeah, they're very happy with him at Oregon right now. They feel like he's going to have a special year.
Well, I would say a lot there. I think if Evan can stay committed to being great, he can be great. I don't know if it was going to happen for him here. I just think it's one of those deals where you come in and there was just a bad taste in his mouth. Some that I think was his own doing, some that was understandable, that he came into an offense that just was, but also could he have done more? Certainly. some of those guys do need a fresh start, and they can start to. So the question is to me with Evan is, can he play through things? Can he sustain it? Because right now it's all fresh and new, and I have a feeling he will, though. I think he will. I think he's one of those guys that's smart enough to know, like, this is it for me. This is my shot, and I can play football for a long time, or I can't. And so I think that'll work out for him. But with that said, the Evan Oregon's getting and Anais Smith, that's a lot to lose in a receiving core. And they got guys right now that Moose needs to be more consistent. We know he can play at an elite level. Noah Thomas will make some of the best catches you've seen. He made an incredible one in the spring game, had 2 short touchdowns. He's got to, avoid the injury bug that's kind of hit him for the last. So he's got to stay on the field. And then Ja'Day Walker had a nice first year, especially a nice finish. Practices hard, is great in that room and stuff. But you look at the teams that have won in this league at the highest of levels, and most of them have multiple high-round NFL receivers.
Especially now.
And if you want to say, well, Georgia didn't, I said, well, they had Pickens and and we're not.
I mean, Lad McConkey was
Brock Bowers and
one of the first picks of the second round, and Brock Bowers first rounder. So yes, they did have elite receivers.
They were late to the party, but they got there. And but then everybody else, LSU, Alabama, just not even in the conference. But I watched A&M play a home and home with Clemson during the Trevor Lawrence.
Oh yeah,
I mean, like
T. Higgins.
You're not winning at that highest level without that, and that's a position where I'm going to have to see those guys really rise up and be players. I know they were pretty bummed when Jabri Barber from Troy hurt his foot, because he was doing some really nice things in the slot, and he'll be out for a while. I think that's a longer term thing. Cyrus Allen will be a big deal. Freshman Isaiah Williams, who they took late from your Gators down there in Florida, but those guys are going to have to be contributors. And then Terry Bussey, like, does everything I just said mean that maybe he gets a little more of a look than expected on offense, or are they continuing to hammer the portal here?
Oh, you just go Travis Hunter and play him 110 snaps. That's all you need to do.
I don't even want to hear your opinion on everything going on in Boulder these last few days.
Well, that was yesterday's show. That was all of yesterday's show. So
go back and watch, because I was busy, but that one, oh man.
Well, you've been through this. You've seen it where there's
the circuit.
Coaching. There's a high profile coach. Everybody's interested in what's going on, and you can see what they're doing, and it doesn't quite jibe with what works. And that's, you saw that for the last couple of years with Jimbo Fisher, which he did know what worked before, but was not doing what was working. And I feel like that's the same way with Deion's roster construction. We'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. But the Jimbo thing, like, you guys saw it kind of devolve, and you told me going into last season, hey, this could be it, because even with that big number, you just can't go on like this. And so they made the change. Elko's there now. We watched him work a miracle. Like, that first year at Duke, he worked a miracle.
He did.
Like, he Jedi mind tricked them to thinking they were really, really good. So that's the part I'm curious to see if he can do that at Texas A&M.
What I'll be really interested in, Andy, is, and they're going to really, I think the Colin Klein hire was massive, and I think they're going to do some really nice things offensively. One of the positions that no one's really talking about, and I've been trying to say this, Reuben Owens, Le'Veon Moss, and Amari Daniels quietly had a really nice spring too. But that running back position and those first two guys, like, they can be special backs. I mean, like, Reuben was a 5-star. They flipped Le'Veon from Bama, and LSU tried to get him late, and they both flashed it at times last year. Le'Veon's flashed it for 2 years. those guys, and Moss looks like a different guy, like the way he's muscled up in the weight room. That running back position could be really strong. So if they can get that O-line and the way Klein attacked the running game at K-State, I mean, they rode that.
Oh yeah, DJ Giddens and
they rode that to a Big 12 title a couple of years ago. If they can run it and play defense, and Elko's MO is stopping the run. He did it here. They led the SEC, I think, a couple of years of his 4 in run defense. If they could do those two things, and if Conner Weigman can be that dude that we saw him flash, he's only had 8 starts. If those things happen, yeah, you go back to what he did in year 1 at Duke with the belief and you go back to even what he did in year 2 at Duke and what he did with this defense in year 1 under Jimbo, with, I think, less talent. I don't think less talent. I know less talent. They had a couple of nice underrated linebackers, and they had players, but not like they do up front now. And I think quietly they're excited about the potential, the way things can shake out in that secondary. So that's kind of like when you say, will A&M hit that higher end of that range? I think it's if those things happen. And that running game is something no one's really going to talk about because it's Mike Elko and it's a defensive coach, and there's excitement around your quarterback, and then there's Colin Klein. But that running game could be pivotal for them.
Quiet excitement in College Station.
Good voice.
It's a lot better than loud disappointment.
Yeah,
Billy.
Loud consternation sucks. Let me tell you.
Yes,
loud.
You had a few years of that. So, yeah. Billy, enjoy the silence.
All right, buddy. Appreciate it. I like is that a Depeche Mode reference?
Yes, it is. Look at that. It's our first Depeche Mode reference on this show. So
thank you. I'm glad I can be a part of it.
We'll be back to your usual Outcast references on Monday. But thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples on 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.